Okay. The United States launched an aerial assault on the Islamic Republic of Iran just tonight on the 20th. And
Thank
so
you very
let's head
much.
over. Here's the president.
A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the three key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan.
Fordow is one of the most important, one that
Everybody
you need the
heard
bunker
those
buster for.
names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success.
Interesting to see what the details
Iran's
are.
key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
How do we know that?
Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier. For 40 years, Iran has been saying
that's a
death
threat.
to America, death to Israel. They have been killing our
This is
people,
true.
blowing off their arms, blowing off their legs with roadside bombs. That was their specialty. We lost over 1,000 people, and hundreds of thousands throughout the Middle East and around the world have died as a direct result of their hate. In particular, so many were killed by their general, Qasem Soleimani. I decided a long time ago that I would not let this happen. It will not continue.
Okay.
I want to thank and congratulate Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. We
Bibi
worked
now,
as
are
a
we?
team like perhaps no team has ever worked before. And we've gone a long way to erasing this horrible threat to Israel. I want to thank the Israeli military for the wonderful job they've done. And most importantly,
The
I want to
Israelis cleared the way.
congratulate the great American patriots who flew those magnificent machines tonight, and all of the United States military on an operation the likes of which the world has not seen in many, many decades. Hopefully, we will no longer need their services in this capacity. I hope that's so. I also want to congratulate the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Raisin Kane, spectacular general,
Raisin Kane.
and all of the brilliant military minds involved in this attack. With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the
that's
last 8 days.
Interesting. What are you
Remember,
threatening?
there are many targets left. Tonight's was the most difficult of them all, by far, and perhaps the most lethal. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill. Most of them can be taken out in a matter of minutes. There's no military in the world that could have done what we did tonight, not
That's
even
true.
close. There has never been a military that could do what took place just a little while ago. Tomorrow, General
Dude, some
Kane,
details would be nice.
Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth will have a press conference at 8 a.m. at the Pentagon. And I want to just thank everybody, and in particular, God. I want to just say we love you, God, and we love our great military. Protect them. God bless the Middle East. God bless Israel. And God bless America. Thank you very much. Thank you.
That's it? No one else? Nothing else? No other details? I guess wait for tomorrow morning. He just came out to formally announce it in person. God bless the U.S., God bless Israel, God bless the Middle East. That was very, very interesting. Very low on details. I was expecting a more of a, I don't know, bomb damage assessment. He left a lot of stuff on the table on this one. Now, I'll be the first to say that Iran has been functionally a dedicated enemy of the United States since before most of us were born, since 1978, when the Shah of Iran was overthrown and replaced by the current regime, the Islamic Republic, run by the spiritual leader, the Ayatollah, currently Ayatollah Khamenei. But what is it's interesting how this has evolved over just the past couple of weeks. This started off with Trump insisting that he wanted to negotiate an end to the Iranian nuclear program entirely and asked that they do that. He gave them 60 days. The negotiations did not proceed apace. Fundamentally, it sounded like the Iranian government didn't want to close the gap between where they were and where Trump was, and Trump was essentially saying no nuclear enrichment, no nuclear weapons, end of story. And now, when Israel launched its attack, the initial position of the U.S. seemed to be, well, look, guys, we warned you things were going to happen, and looks like Israel's on its own. They're doing their thing. It's not us. But, obviously we're not holding them back now, so too bad. If you want to come back to the negotiating table, you're welcome. And then it was followed up by tremendous success, it seems, or at least they completely wiped out the Iranian Air Force, or at least they certainly made it a non-issue. And Iran was throwing, vengeance rockets back like they were the Nazis, just trying to strike back and make Israel bleed, but they didn't really seem to be stopping anything. And it became clear, it came to the point where Israel's like, look, the only country that has the bunker buster conventional weapons that could take out this very deeply buried location, Fordo is what it's called. The only country that could do that was the USA, with its bunker buster bombs that were deployed by B-2 stealth bombers. And it sounds like, I'll be frank, Trump was playing a little bit of drunken boxing there for a bit. Trying to suggest will he or won't he, and he kept saying, oh yeah, I'll definitely be bombing them. But let's be honest, Trump sometimes comes across as a complete blowhard, and he's gassing on about how he's going to bomb Iran. It's kind of easy to not take him seriously when he does that. Well, for many people. For some people, it's all too easy to take him seriously, and they immediately go into panic mode when he starts talking like that. But in this case, I didn't think... I'll be honest, it sounded to me like this was a man who really wanted to negotiate an end to it, and he really wanted Iran to come back to the table, and it didn't sound like they wanted to. Like, the last I heard was that Iran was coming down and saying, nope, we are not going to do this. We are done. We are, you want to talk to us? Stop the bombing. And that was exactly the position that the North Vietnamese took in 1968 during the Vietnam War, when the United States Air Force was engaged in a bombing campaign against the North, Operation Rolling Thunder. It was a limited campaign. They weren't even using the big bombers or anything. They were using fighter aircraft to bomb it because they didn't want to use B-52s next to China. And what ended up happening was LBJ, desperate for a political win in 1968 to boost his own party, agreed to stop bombing the North in return for coming to the negotiating table. Well, once you do that, the political will to resume the bombing campaign was over, and you basically just gave up your big lever that got them to the negotiating table in the first place. So I think he was stuck a little bit between a rock and a hard place in that. The Israelis couldn't close the deal, basically. They did everything they could, and they had really seriously damaged the country and the program and taken out leaders, but the program itself, the main, I guess, enrichment reactor in Fordo, Iran, was still there, and you couldn't get to it without something serious. Nuclear weapons could do it, and I said to more than one person, if the Israelis are serious, and if this is a serious threat, then they might have to nuke Fordo to really take it out. Here's an example of what this looks like here now. There we go. Oh, wow, it worked. That's Fordo. At least that was Fordo before tonight. I don't know what it looks like after tonight. And that was something definitely missing from President's speech. He said, obviously, it was a great success. No one else could do this. Thank you, everybody. God bless America. That was fine. That's good. President's got to rally the troops at the end of the day, and I'm with you on that. But what I found interesting is that he gave us no details at all. So it's all very well and good to say, yeah, it was a great success, but what were the details? Because you take on something that looks like this, you take something that looks like that, and that's just the top of it. That's just the upper deck. This thing was apparently built in old Iranian Revolutionary Guard Command tunnels. I guess tunnels they had built kind of as a last redoubt in the event that the USA, or for that matter, the Russians, ever decided they wanted to just take over Iran, because they were getting ready for war in every different direction at one point. It's funny. I think there were U.S. government contingency plans for a war in which the Soviets invaded Iran, and so the U.S. came to fight the Soviets, and if we showed up in Iran, odds are the Iranians would be fighting both us and the Soviets at the same time. It would just be a three-way war for Iran, which would have been awesome, right? But anyway, you see a bunker that looks like this, and you know what? It's not. I don't know. That thing looks pretty seriously buried and deep. This is Luke Skywalker coming in, bombing the small thermal exhaust port just above the main port, right? I mean, that's a tough thing to try to get down into. And even if you hit the thing dead on, how deep does it go? I mean, that's just, like I said, that's just the parking garage. The thing goes deeper than that. So I'd really like to see what their bomb damage assessment is and how good it looks like the strike was. Because with all that said, from what I understand, this plant is the key fuel enrichment plant that the whole Iranian nuclear program was centered on. It's basically the centerpiece of that entire plan. And if you can take that down, from my understanding at least, you've set them back. Now, does that mean forever? No, of course, nothing is forever, child. Come on. But it does mean that if you could smash down the other places that they also have, which are also doing work and research and that kind of thing, then we're in a very interesting place at this point. It means functionally the only threat we have from Iran is the same threats that we always had: terror attacks, political grandstanding in the Middle East, encouraging America's enemies and that kind of stuff, which they're going to do anyway. I think that, who was it? Was it Leonard Peikoff, of all people, the old Ayn Rand associate, the one who was Ayn Rand's intellectual heir? I never really liked that title. He always put on airs about that. But the objectivist philosopher Leonard Peikoff wrote an article 25 years ago at this point, and it was called The Wrong War. Iraq, the wrong war. And he basically said the U.S. fixation on Iraq, starting in 1990 when Iraq attacked and conquered Kuwait, and on to the Iraq War, was the wrong war. And that whatever bad actor Saddam Hussein was, he was just some tin pot dictator. There was no movement for Saddam Hussein. There was no reason that anyone would rally to his side other than the fact that he was the top dog in Iraq, and you wanted to play in those circles in Iraq. He was a horrible guy. He was a murderer, genocidal, you might even say. But his ambitions were limited. He was very much a very raw, naked power politics guy, a dictator in the same cut of Stalin, let's say. No, not Stalin. Not even Mussolini. More, like Franco, someone like that. He wasn't anybody really. He wasn't going anywhere. Yeah, it sucked if you lived in Iraq, but he wasn't going any. He had been hemmed in. He had been stopped. He wasn't going to try it again. And to the extent that there was an Iraqi nuclear weapons of mass destruction program, which of course it turns out there wasn't, but to the extent there was, it was defensive because he didn't want to be attacked again. Right? And I think Peikoff made the point that the various air campaigns and ultimately the conquest of Iraq in 2002 was a fundamental strategic error. We were going after the wrong enemy. And this is something that I think is absolutely true. The human mind loves to solve problems. And oftentimes, if it's faced with a very tough problem, what it'll do is look for an easier problem to solve. And the reality was Iran was that tough problem. Iran is that tough problem. Why? Because for all the trouble that people like Saddam Hussein or Bashir Assad and his dad, horrible dictator, right? Horrible people. They'll conquer a neighboring country if they can get away with it. Saddam in Kuwait, the Assads in Lebanon, right? They have no compunction at all about massacring their own people if they get in the way. Hama in Syria, of course, right? Whereas Bashar Assad's dad went and just leveled the whole town. Then he invited the press in afterwards to brag about it. Tom Friedman, back when he was actually a real reporter who actually did real work for a living, actually covered that. Covered it very well. He was a good reporter back in the 80s. Those guys weren't grand strategic threats. And as much of a pipsqueak country Iran was, it actually had an ideological basis. And this ideological Islamic extremist philosophy that they had endorsed there, that was actually their bid to play for all the marbles. It was philosophically co-equal to the Western liberalism idea, and the Soviet communist internationalist idea. It was a different path. And it was one that was attractive, particularly for people who didn't want to deal with the, in-your-face atheism and secularism of the Soviets and frankly, the communism, and the people who thought the Western secular decadence, that pretended to be religious, have a moral core around it, but in reality was almost as bad as the Soviets, in some ways even worse. That's because, after all, the USA was the great Satan. The Soviet Union was just one of the lesser Satans, like Israel. So, in that sense, I think he had a point. In the sense that ideas move us, Iran has always been our enemy. And I think that in retrospect, Leonard Peikoff,
thank you very much,
article called it straight
a
there.
short time ago.
All right, so this thing's starting to play again. Stupid YouTube. So I agree that Iran is a threat, and I've always been in favor, for example, of just getting rid of their nuclear weapons. They can't be allowed to have nuclear weapons. I think the problem with Iran is that everyone knew, conquering Iraq wasn't a cakewalk, and that's a country that's smaller with much easier terrain to maneuver mobile forces in, lots of open desert. Iran is a mountainous country, lots of people, and the Iraqis fought us out of pure nationalism, and there was also a bit of religious extremism there too. The Iranians would be all about the religious war. That would be a tough occupation. It's also why I say I don't think under any circumstances we should engage in a war of conquest against Iran unless we are truly back up against the wall. And say, well, Iran starts throwing Iran starts throwing nuclear weapons around, Iran ends as a country. That's the response. And that's no other response that could be appropriate for us at that point. And then sure, let the United Nations clean up whatever's left at that point. So the long story short is we don't have too many details here. I'm going to watch it again one more time, see if there's any more information out there. We'll run a quick search for, what we have here on the news or anything here. Let's see what we got. Here, we have something from Daily Wire. Let's see what's going on with them here real quick.
Regime change in Iran. But of course, that is not contingent on what happened tonight. That would not be contingent on a terror attack. That has been something that has been building for a long, long time. And I mentioned this in my first reaction video to the news right when it broke. Whatever your feelings on Trump's actions in Iran tonight, you have to recognize This has been building for a long time. I was reading, I think it was ABC's coverage of this, and ABC News slipped into its coverage a little line that said, the bombs, the weapons that were used in destroying these facilities were developed specifically to destroy these facilities. Now, we've known that these facilities exist. The international community has since 2009. The United States intelligence community probably has known long before that, which means that what happened tonight was not some impulsive decision from Trump. AOC had such a stupid reaction. She said the president's disastrous decision to bomb Iran without authorization.
Right. Hold the phone. Hold the phone here. I saw this earlier. This is stupid, and this is exactly what I would expect out of someone like AOC, who is frankly a bartender who's out of her intellectual depth when she talks about the Constitution. This, however, I think I took kind of personally. Thomas Massie, the libertarian from Kentucky, claims that the attack is not constitutional. That's a load of horse bung right there. I can't stress this one enough. Thomas Massie is not an idiot. He's well read on the Constitution, and he takes his job as a congressman very seriously. And I know this just from looking at experience, from seeing what he's said and watching what he's backed. This is a lie. It's outright. There's no other answer for this. But I don't see how Congressman Massie can possibly claim that this act is unconstitutional. Now, you may say it's unwise. It opens us up to attack. It's risky. It's not going to achieve its objectives. Why didn't Trump and that make an announcement as to how successful it was? On and on and on. All of this we can have a conversation about. But this here? No. The president is commander-in-chief of the armed forces. He has delegated powers to order the military into action, and certainly has the powers to do it, especially if there is a fast-moving situation that implicates U.S. national security, an attack on the United States or some other imminent threat or some other event that requires it. Going back countless years, all the way back to America's first undeclared war in the Middle East in 1800s, in the 1790s, the war against the Barbary states, the war against the Barbary pirates, undeclared war. The president absolutely has the authority to take actions like this. That's simply there. What Congress can do, first of all, it can just cut funding. No, President, you may not spend money on military action against Iraq. The second thing is it could legislate directly and say, no, President, you may not, or whatever this airstrike, air campaign you're engaged in must end by this date certain. Sign it, pass it, Trump vetoes it, override the veto. That is, in fact, exactly what happened in 1973. After the Paris Peace Treaty was signed between the United States and North Vietnam, which ended the U.S. involvement, formally at least, in fighting the war against the communists in South Vietnam, although there was still a lot of residual involvement, but it ended active U.S. combat participation in South Vietnam. It did not end in Laos and Cambodia, and the Nixon administration continued an air campaign in Cambodia well after the signing of the peace treaty with the North Vietnamese, because this air campaign was against the Khmer Rouge, or in Laos against the Pathet Lao. And it wasn't until Congress actually passed legislation barring the president from engaging in those activities without further approval later on down the road. The president's hands were then tied at that point. They passed it, they overrode Nixon's veto, and that was the end of it. Now, you can argue whether or not that led directly or indirectly to the complete collapse of Southeast Asia, or the Indochina at least, to the communists just a couple of years later. I think it certainly did. But regardless, you can't say that anyone was coloring outside the constitutional lines. The president has the power to order the Air Force to bomb enemy targets. Congress has the power to fund it or to not, or to restrict the president's actions. Even the War Powers Resolution of 1973, in theory, allows the president 60 days of combat operations, and then he has to come back and report to Congress. And Congress can take action or not at their option. It's really kind of the law itself is kind of badly written. I don't think it's really has much teeth. But the point is, even this one, this War Powers Resolution, which was theoretically a restriction on the president's war power, whatever Trump did here today was perfectly in line with that. He's got 59 days starting tomorrow to come back to Congress and report on what he did. Assuming this didn't count, which it really didn't. I think he has to formally notify Congress that he's initiated some actions and justify it or explain it in some extent. And it's usually very pro forma when they've done that in the past. Most presidents have argued that it's not constitutional, yada, yada, yada. But whatever, it doesn't matter. Because even then, he still hasn't violated the Constitution. So Thomas Massie, he's not stupid. He's not stupid. The alternative I see here is he's just lying for his own political grandstanding purposes. And you may be vehemently opposed to this airstrike on Iran, but argue that case, you idiot. Don't go around yelling about Constitution, because that just makes you sound, like idiots like this one. For the love of God.
Grave violation of the Constitution and congressional war powers. First of all, let's just take that, because she has other dumb things she said. But let's just take that for a second. So it's a grave violation of the Constitution. How so? Because, well, she explained, because it violates congressional war powers. AOC is apparently unfamiliar with an act of Congress, which is the War Powers Act. War Powers
Resolution, but whatever,
the
dude.
President as commander-in-chief.
Yeah.
If it were not clear enough already, it as a legislative matter.
All right, I'm going to skip ahead here because, come on, man. All right, I think he's not going to say anything I didn't just say to you. So, well, you heard it from here. You heard it here first. All right, I'm going to go one last shot here. Let's see if we got anything else with your Iran. But I don't think we do. I say the Thomas Massie bit was most annoying to me. I really think that I expected a lot better from him. I expected a lot more knowledge from him than what I saw out of that. We don't need liars about the Constitution. We don't need people confusing everyone about what the Constitution says or it doesn't. All right, CBS News, see what we got here.
Hear about the reward?
Oh, Jesus, commercials. Fox News, what do we have here?
This is a Fox News alert. News from the President of the United States that there has been an attack inside Iran. Just moments ago, President Donald Trump putting out on Truth Social, we have completed our very successful attack on
this is not live. They
nuclear
lied.
sites.
All right. You know what? Rather than just occupy space and time with all of this,
is an ABC News special report.
ABC News special
Good
report.
evening.
This is all like an hour ago. Yeah. So, Tel Aviv skyline. Oh, okay. Wait, here's something new here. All right. Nothing happening there. Anything on skies?
Ability for Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon. He claims he's done that tonight, although it is also the case, I've been speaking to experts over the past few days, American Department of Defense officials, whose view is that you could never completely destroy Iran's nuclear ability without having boots on the ground. So we'll see whether or not he's achieved that objective. His other objective was to create a sense of deterrence, to show, in simple terms, to show everyone who's boss. And he's not only, it's not only the Iranians. He knows that the Russians are watching.
Okay, at the end of the day, we know what you're going to say here. They're all saying the same thing. The reality is we don't have anything new. We just know what the president said. He says it was a tremendous success, that they completely obliterated Iran's nuclear capacity. The U.S. Air Force did, presumably using B-2 stealth bombers, dropping bunker busters on Iran. We don't have any more news. It's just going to be people gassing on. If you have any questions, hit me in the comments field as usual. We'll be glad to get to them. Be sure to hit like and subscribe if you like this commentary. We will do more of it as time goes on. But otherwise, I think we've reached the end of the road. Thank you so much for watching. Last word is yours. And as soon as there's more breaking news, we'll come back here.